Never clean the oxygen sensor like this. The error that destroys your engine. Cleaning the oxygen sensor seems like an easy and cheap solution, but there are ways of doing it that destroy the piece in seconds, and the worst part is that the engine keeps starting. You don't realize the damage until the fuel consumption goes up, the power goes down, and the check engine turns on. By that moment, the sensor already has no solution. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what methods ruin the sensor, why they do it at a technical level, and how to correctly diagnose before taking any decision. Stay until the end, because there is a diagnostic data point that the majority passes by and that can save you from replacing a sensor that still works. 2. The error of home products, WD-40 and silicones. Let's start with the most common error, and paradoxically, the one that appears with more frequency even in shops with years of experience. Applying WD-40 or products with silicone near the oxygen sensor. The logic seems impeccable. The thread has months without being touched, the zone is oxidized, and the mechanic needs to lubricate before dismounting. WD-40 is in every shop, resolves 90% of the friction problems, and nobody in their life has associated it with electronic damage. The problem is that the oxygen sensor doesn't react like any other piece of the engine, and that difference changes everything. When you apply WD-40 or silicone near the sensor, the mineral oil and the silicone vapors don't stay where you put them. With the heat of the exhaust system, those compounds vaporize. And since the sensor is designed precisely to absorb and analyze what is in the environment, those vapors are captured directly by the active element. What occurs next has a name in automotive diagnosis: sensor poisoning. The silicone deposits itself over the active surface of the electrode in a progressive and irreversible form. There is no going back. From that moment, the chain of consequences is direct and predictable. The sensor loses the capacity to distinguish between a rich mixture and a poor one. The values it sends to the engine control unit start to move away from reality. The computer, which blindly trusts in that information, adjusts the injection in an incorrect form. The consumption goes up, the emissions shoot up, and the catalytic converter starts receiving mixtures for which it was not designed. And here comes the damage that almost nobody calculates. The silicone vapors don't stop at the sensor. They travel through the exhaust system and end up depositing themselves in the interior of the catalytic converter, blocking the active surface of the ceramic substrate. A catalytic converter contaminated with silicone doesn't recover. There is no cleaning that brings it back. It has to be replaced. And the cost of a catalytic converter far exceeds that of any sensor. 3. Damage from aggressive chemicals, gasoline, brakes, and carburetor. If WD-40 sounds like carelessness, what we are going to see now comes from a completely different place. It is the error of the mechanic who does know that the sensor has contamination and decides to do things right. He wants a deep cleaning. And it is exactly in that attempt of being more careful where some of the most serious and irreversible damages that exist on this piece occur. The first method that circulates in forums and do-it-yourself channels is to soak the sensor in gasoline. The idea has logic. The fuel dissolves the carbon, the organic deposits, and the accumulated grease on the tip. And yes, the gasoline dissolves that. The problem is that it also dissolves what should not be touched. The zirconia-type oxygen sensor, the most common in modern vehicles, has in its interior a ceramic element of zirconium dioxide, covered with platinum electrodes on its internal and external surfaces. Those layers of platinum have a thickness of the order of micrometers. They are the ones that catalyze the oxygen reaction and allow the ionic flow that generates the signal. When you submerge the sensor in gasoline, the fuel penetrates in the micropores of the ceramic element. Up to there, it could seem like only an aggressive cleaning. But when reinstalling the sensor and exposing it to the temperatures of the exhaust, which oscillate between 300 and 900 degrees Celsius, the fuel trapped in the ceramic vaporizes and burns in a violent form from the inside. That thermal shock can fracture the ceramic or destroy the platinum electrodes in a definitive manner. And if the ceramic doesn't fracture physically, the problem doesn't disappear either. The gasoline leaves carbonaceous residues inside the porous material that permanently alter its capacity to conduct oxygen ions. The sensor keeps generating a signal, but it is no longer a signal that reflects reality. It is only noise disguised as data. The second aggressive method is the brake or carburetor cleaner in aerosol. The reasoning is equally understandable. These solvents eliminate grease and deposits with efficacy over metallic pieces. The error is in assuming that the oxygen sensor is an ordinary metallic piece, and it is not. Brake and carburetor cleaners contain high aggressiveness solvents, principally acetone, methanol, or methylene chloride in previous formulations. In the moment they come into contact with the tip of the sensor, they attack the platinum coating immediately. That coating is so thin that it offers no chemical resistance. In seconds, the solvent starts to detach the platinum from the ceramic surface. Without platinum, the sensor cannot catalyze the oxygen reaction. The signal becomes imprecise, slow, or directly erroneous. And there is no recovery. The platinum doesn't regenerate, and there is no procedure that restores it without replacing the complete sensor. 4. Damage from physical intervention, brushing, and pressurized air. There is a third group of people that arrives at this point with an apparently reasonable conclusion. If the chemicals are prohibited, the solution has to be mechanical. Scrub, brush, sand, blow with compressed air. The reasoning seems infallible. The result, almost always, is the same as with the chemicals: a destroyed sensor. The brushing and the sanding start from a logical but incorrect comparison. In spark plugs, contacts, and injectors, the mechanical cleaning works, but the oxygen sensor has a characteristic that makes it radically different from any of those pieces. Its active element is a platinum coating of barely a few micrometers of thickness, deposited over a porous ceramic. A metallic brush, a fine-grained sandpaper, or even a cloth with some texture can be sufficient to eliminate that layer completely in a matter of seconds. Bosch and Denso establish it without ambiguity in their technical manuals. Any mechanical abrasion over the tip of the sensor invalidates it in an immediate form. It doesn't matter if the brush has soft bristles, if the sandpaper is 2000 grain, or if the contact lasted less than a second. The platinum layer resists no friction, and once damaged, no possible repair exists. None. Something that usually surprises. Even direct contact with the fingers can generate problems. The natural oils of the skin deposit themselves over the active surface and can temporarily alter the readings. When manipulating the sensor, it always has to be done by the metallic casing and the cable. The tip is not touched. Never. Now, the pressurized air. This case is different because, unlike the brush, there is no physical contact nor chemicals involved. It seems absolutely innocent, and that is precisely what makes it dangerous. The damage comes from something that cannot be seen. The zirconia-type sensors and the wideband ones have in their interior a system of reference channels that connect the ceramic element with the exterior atmospheric air. That connection is what allows the sensor to compare the concentration of oxygen in the exhaust gases with the level of ambient air, constant at 21%. It is that comparison that generates the electrical signal. Without that clean and free reference channel, the sensor has nothing to compare with. When you direct a jet of compressed air toward the tip, the pressure pushes particles of dirt, solvent residues, or soot directly toward the interior of those channels. Once obstructed or contaminated, the sensor loses its reference point. The readings become inconsistent or directly false, and that damage has no solution from the outside. What makes this type of failure especially treacherous is its delay. The sensor can seem completely normal for days or even weeks until the obstruction progresses enough to affect the readings in a visible manner. By that moment, the driver already forgot that he cleaned the sensor a month ago, the mechanic looks for the problem in another place, and the diagnosis complicates itself unnecessarily for something that could have been avoided with a single decision. 5. Reinstallation errors, the damage that occurs after. Let's suppose that you managed to do the whole process without damaging the sensor, or that you are directly installing a new one. Many assume that at this point, the work has already finished. It is an error that comes out expensive. The reinstallation is an important source of premature failures, and it is the step that is most underestimated in the whole process. The first error is the incorrect torque. The oxygen sensors have a tightening specification that generally oscillates between 40 and 55 Newton meters, although it varies according to the manufacturer and the vehicle. Tightening above that value can deform the thread, compress the ceramic element, or generate mechanical tensions that don't manifest immediately but hours or days after, when the engine reaches temperature and the materials dilate. On the contrary, tightening too little causes exhaust gas leaks through the thread, which contaminates the readings and can generate false indications of poor mixture. The solution is not to calibrate the force by hand. It is to use a torque wrench, adjusted to the value that the vehicle's manual indicates. There is no substitute for that. The second error is the anti-seize badly applied. It is a useful product, many times necessary to facilitate future removals, but it must go exclusively over the threads of the sensor body, in minimum quantity, and without reaching the active tip nor the connector. The anti-seize contains metallic compounds that, if they come into contact with the sensor element, alter the readings. Besides, many original equipment sensors already come with the threads treated from the factory, with which applying additional anti-seize is not only unnecessary, but directly counterproductive. The third error is the incorrect routing of the cable. The cable has to remain completely away from hot surfaces and moving parts. Although its insulation is designed to withstand higher temperatures than conventional wiring, it has its limits. If it ends up in contact with the exhaust tube or the manifold, the insulation degrades progressively, a short circuit appears, and the signal becomes erratic. In extreme cases, the cable melts and the sensor is left completely without signal. Fix it with the original supports or with high-temperature clamps, and verify that it has sufficient slack to absorb the movement of the engine on its supports. Finally, after any installation, erase all the error codes with the onboard diagnostic scanner. The control unit needs clean conditions to relearn the sensor parameters. If codes from the previous sensor remain, conflicts can be generated in the adaptation process. Perform 2 or 3 complete driving cycles before evaluating the result. 6. The moment of diagnosis: scanner, multimeter, and the tip of the heating circuit. Before deciding if a sensor needs cleaning, replacement, or if the problem is in a completely different place, you need an objective diagnosis. Not a visual inspection, not the intuition, not the accumulated experience. Measurable and reproducible data. Because the intuition lies, and with the oxygen sensor, lying to yourself comes out expensive. The first tool is the onboard diagnostic scanner. Connect it with the engine at normal operating temperature, above 80 degrees Celsius in the coolant, and observe the behavior of the sensor in real time. A narrowband sensor in good condition oscillates between 0.1 and 0.9 volts in a fluid and constant form, with a frequency of at least 8 to 10 cycles per minute at idle. If the signal remains fixed at a value, oscillates very slowly, or jumps in an erratic form without a recognizable pattern, the sensor has a functional problem. For a wideband lambda sensor, in position before the catalytic converter in the majority of modern vehicles, the scanner must show a lambda value close to 1.0 in stabilized conditions. Constant deviations in any direction indicate that the sensor can no longer maintain the stoichiometric reference. The second tool is the multimeter. And here comes the data that separates a complete diagnosis from one that leaves the doors open to error. The heating circuit operates in a completely independent form from the signal circuit. Its function is to bring the ceramic element to the optimal operating temperature, between 650 and 850 degrees Celsius, as soon as possible after startup. This matters for a very concrete reason. A sensor that takes too long to reach that temperature sends incorrect data during the first minutes of operation, exactly when the control unit adjusts the mixture with greater intensity. The result is excessive enrichment in cold, greater consumption, and elevated emissions, although the sensor seems to function well once the engine is hot. It is a failure invisible to the eyes of the driver. To verify it, disconnect the sensor from the wiring harness and measure the resistance between the terminals of the heater with the multimeter in ohm meter mode. In Bosch, Denso, and NTK sensors, the correct range in cold is situated between 2 and 14 ohms at ambient temperature. A reading outside that range, infinite, or unstable when moving the cable, indicates a damaged heater. And this is what matters most of all at this point. A sensor with a deteriorated heater can have the tip visually impeccable. No visual inspection detects it. No cleaning recovers it. That is why it is behind many fault codes that are erroneously diagnosed as dirty sensors, when the real problem is the heating element out of specification. That 30-second measurement can save you an unnecessary replacement, or confirm to you that the sensor you believed in good condition has already arrived at the end of its useful cycle. 7. The reality of wear: why cleaning cannot win against time. This is the point that is most uncomfortable to hear. It is also the most important of the video. The oxygen sensors don't fail principally from the outside. They fail from the inside. And that means that no cleaning, however technical and careful it may be, can resolve the fundamental problem. Time is not cleaned, it is replaced. The most frequent internal failure modes are 3. The first is the deterioration of the heater, which we already saw in detail. The filament works under extreme thermal cycles during the entire useful life of the vehicle. With time, its resistance increases, it takes more time to bring the ceramic element to temperature, and eventually fails in a permanent form. The second is the internal contamination of the ceramic element. Throughout thousands of hours of operation, the sensor absorbs traces of burned oil, silicone coming from certain fuels and coolants, phosphorus from the oil additives, and other compounds that accumulate progressively in the porous interior of the material. The key point is this: that contamination is not on the exterior surface of the sensor, which is the only part that any cleaning method can reach. It is inside the material. No external product nor procedure exists that eliminates it. The third failure mode is the loss of response speed due to aging. With time, the ceramic element loses ionic density and its capacity to react before changes in the oxygen concentration diminishes. A new sensor responds in tens of milliseconds. An aged one can take several seconds. For the control unit, which makes injection decisions in real time, that slowness is functionally equivalent to an incorrect signal. The engine doesn't distinguish between a slow sensor and one that lies. It reacts equally before both. As for the useful life, the one-wire sensors without heater generally reach around 50,000 kilometers. The 3 or 4-wire ones with heater have an estimated life of between 80,000 and 160,000 kilometers. If your sensor has surpassed those figures, the probability of significant internal deterioration is high, independently of the exterior appearance. The question that has to be asked is not, can I clean this sensor? The correct question is, does this sensor still have the functional capacity that the engine needs? And that question can only be answered by the scanner and the multimeter, not the sight. If the diagnosis confirms that the sensor no longer fulfills its specifications, the only real solution is the replacement. 8. Final recommendation: what sensor to install and how to close it well. If the diagnosis confirms that the sensor needs replacement, the choice of the piece is as important as all the previous process. The market is full of economic options, and choosing badly can bring you back to the same problem in a matter of months. All the work done well, ruined for saving $20 on the component. The technical recommendation has no margin of doubt. Use sensors from the manufacturers that produce for the original equipment. Bosch is original equipment supplier for the great majority of European vehicles and many Asian and American ones. Denso supplies principally to Toyota, Honda, and other Japanese manufacturers. NTK, the automotive division of NGK, manufactures original equipment sensors for multiple brands. These manufacturers not only replicate the specifications of the original line, but guarantee the compatibility of the heater, the calibration of the ceramic element, and the resistance to contamination in real operating conditions. Generic sensors can function correctly during the first weeks, but the quality of the ceramic element, the thickness of the platinum coating, and the robustness of the heater tend to be inferior. The typical result is a sensor that starts giving erratic readings considerably before it should, and the circle begins again. As for the position, if the sensor is before the catalytic converter, it is the one that controls the mixture in real time. Here the precision is critical and there is no place for compromises. Original equipment sensor or direct equivalent from Bosch, Denso, or NTK without exceptions. If it is after the catalytic converter, its principal function is to monitor the efficiency of the converter, not to control the mixture directly. There is somewhat more margin, although the quality continues to be important. Once the sensor is installed with the correct torque, the cable well fixed and away from the heat, and the connectors clean and dry, erase all the diagnostic codes with the scanner. The control unit needs to start from clean conditions to relearn the parameters of the new sensor. If codes from the previous sensor remain, they can interfere with the adaptation process. Then perform 2 or 3 complete driving cycles: cold start, normal operating temperature, combination of city and highway if possible, and shutdown. After those cycles, connect the scanner and verify that the readings are within the expected ranges. No shortcut exists that comes out cheaper than doing it right from the beginning.